Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Maine Take. My name is Dana Connors, and I'm pleased to be the host of this weekly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Each week, with the help of our guests, we take a look at the ideas, the issues, and the initiatives at work in the state. Each of those have a goal of improving the lives and the livelihood of our people, while at the same time growing our economy. This week, it's all about issues at the state level as well as the national level. At the national level is where we begin today's program. And in that respect, I am delighted to be able to say that we have with us as our guest, Senator Susan Collins, who will share with us her perspective on what's coming out of Washington these days. We have pre-recorded her interview, and I am pleased to present it to you right now. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome, I will say, back to our show, the Maine Take, Senator Susan Collins. It's wonderful having you with us. We know how busy you are, because if you look at the agenda of the representing so many issues before you today, the fact you are giving us 15 minutes, I am so grateful. So why don't we jump right into it? And obviously, like I said, there's a lot to talk about, but what's on everyone's mind is the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And I know that you had a Zoom call with President Zelensky on Saturday, but that conjures up so many issues that are of concern to us, from the refugee issue to the possible, and perhaps predictable cyber attacks on our private plus our public infrastructure, the oil import ban. It's just a number of issues get wrapped up in that. Can you tell us, or what you can tell us about your Zoom call with the president?
First, let me say that it was absolutely inspiring to participate in this Zoom call with President Zelensky. He has remained in Ukraine. He's been out on the streets. He's encouraging his people to resist this absolutely brutal and unprovoked Russian invasion by Putin, who has visions of recreating the former Soviet Union and is targeting civilians as he seeks to bombard escape routes and cities throughout Ukraine. The fact that President Zelensky has not received everything that he has asked for, or virtually everything, there's one area where I don't think we can help him, is troubling to me. And with every day, every hour, every moment that Ukraine is under attack, more and more people are dying. And this is a true David and Goliath story. And I would like to see us send more lethal weapons. I think we ought to send unmanned armed drones to Ukraine so that they could take out that Russian convoy, which stretches some 40 miles and to me is a sitting duck right now. We need more help. We need to give them more help to protect the ships that are in their harbors. And we need to work with our NATO allies to make sure that they are getting some aircraft, MiGs, old Russian-styled MiGs, which the Ukrainians know how to operate, that are located right next door in Poland. As you mentioned, there's also a humanitarian crisis. I am very disappointed that we adjourned for the week last week before passing a package that would have provided for humanitarian aid for those who are fleeing Ukraine or whose food and other supplies are being cut off right now, and also more of the weaponry that they need. I do not think that we can institute a no-fly zone. That is the one thing that President Zelensky has asked for that I don't think we can do, because that would involve having US and NATO countries shooting down directly Russian aircraft. That would broaden the war to virtually all of Europe and to our shores as well. So that I don't think we can do, but we could do much better in providing what is needed. In fact, we already should have provided more Javelin and Stinger missiles to target both artillery and aircraft, and provide humanitarian assistance. And this is one other issue. We should be providing more intelligence, more real-time intelligence to the Ukrainians.
Let me ask you this. You didn't mention it, but there seems to be a growing interest in banning oil from Russia. Even though it's not a large percentage, it probably represents a large amount, and that seems to be a growing interest. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely, and thank you for reminding me of that, because I should have mentioned that I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that's introduced by Joe Manchin and Lisa Murkowski that would ban American imports of Russian oil or gas. You know, we were energy independent for a time in the last administration. And then unfortunately, what I think has been already proven to be a mistake, President Biden decided to cut off the pipeline that was going to bring us oil from Canada, the XL pipeline. And we've actually increased our imports from Russia, the opposite of what we should be doing. We have the capacity to be energy independent in this country. Russia's economy is heavily dependent on selling gas and oil. I'm glad the Germans have finally come around and said that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would bring natural gas from Russia to Germany, will be cut off. And I think the least we can do is to also say no more imports of Russian oil or gas.
Yeah, I will say this. It's been amazing and extremely encouraging to see the unity that exists with NATO and the Western countries. That is too as well inspiring, because you worry about that if one will break away, and so far there's been no indication that's going to happen.
To me, it is so important that the administration has worked well with our NATO partners in an approach to Ukraine and the horrible aggression and brutal war that Russian forces are inflicting on the Ukrainians. And it is a positive development that the NATO allies in the United States are working as one to help Ukraine. That is encouraging. And it's why I've also think that it's really important that Congress and the administration work as one and not send a message of being divided in our support for Ukraine. That's really important as well right now.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's did President Zelensky add anything else to the conversation that struck you in one way or another, in terms of, you mentioned how inspiring he was, and I think many of us recognize that, because he, as you said, he's been there and constantly present. So was there anything else he may have left you with?
He stressed the urgency of providing assistance, which is why I am a bit frustrated that we did not act last week on the package of humanitarian and weaponry for Ukraine. That's got to be a priority. There are talks about whether it should be attached to the comprehensive government funding bill. That would be fine if we'll do it quickly, but if we can't do it quickly, we should pass the Ukraine supplemental funding bill right now, today. It should have been done, frankly, 2 weeks ago. And the urgency of that was underscored by the president of Ukraine. And President Zelensky was in a room so that you couldn't tell where he was. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. You can tell he has been up around the clock, working night and day, keeping the world, the civilized world, united, and working with NATO. But there was some frustration on his part, which I think is very understandable. His citizens have been absolutely incredible in their resistance. And that's why many of us, and I don't know whether you can see it, but many of us have taken to wearing little flag pins that one's the Ukraine flag and one's the American flag, to show that we stand with Ukraine. And I sent President Zelensky a message saying that Maine stands with the men and women and children of Ukraine.
Yeah, we certainly do. And it's appropriate that you did it. And we thank you for doing that. So many things to talk about. This certainly takes center stage because of the impact it has on any of us or all of us when you think of the hardship that Ukraine people are going through and their resilience and their commitment. It's a special, special message. And it can't happen too soon that ruble sinks and the economy goes to where it needs to go in order to bring some closure, we hope, to this tragedy. Let's move on. I know tomorrow is an interview that's very special, and to consider the nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm not going to ask you your position on it because I know you wouldn't tell me anyway, but you're going to be interviewing tomorrow anyway. So although I do know that you have supported this same person in the past.
That's right. You know, when you evaluate a Supreme Court nominee, it is a different level of intensity as far as the preparation. I very much look forward to meeting Judge Jackson. I have not met her before, and we're going to sit down in my office, and I hope to have at least an hour to talk to her about her judicial philosophy, about her approach to cases, about whether she sees herself as an activist judge, or exactly how she approaches decision-making. She has impeccable credentials. She's been a law clerk, a public defender. She's worked in private practice. She's been a district court judge who's handled more than 500 cases. She's been on the circuit court for the past few months, not that long a time. And now she's up for appointment to the Supreme Court. So because circuit courts and district court judges are bound by Supreme Court rulings, I want to get a better sense from her on exactly how she approaches cases and her judicial philosophy. So I'm very much looking forward to this interview. I've done a great deal of preparation for it and have a lot of questions that I want to talk with her about. And I'm grateful that the administration and the chair of the Judiciary Committee have made her available to me so early in the confirmation process. And indeed, President Biden called me twice to discuss his nomination process, and the first time, and then he called me the morning before he made the announcement of his selection. I've also spent a great deal of time with his counsel and with the other attorneys on my staff, and a Harvard Law School professor who is from Augusta, Maine, and others who I've been able to rely on to help me prepare as a non-lawyer to question this judge.
Senator, as long as I have known you in a number of different ways, there is no question you will be very well prepared. There is no doubt about that, I'm sure. Well, good luck with that. I also I'm running short on time, and I appreciate every minute you've given us, but I do want to talk about the bill that you introduced that addresses an issue in Maine that for a long time, we have asylum seekers coming to our state. They have incredible credentials, experience, talent, skill, and yet we can't get them in the workplace. You have a bill you introduced that's going to help us do that. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. It is such a frustrating situation right now because what we have are people who have come to Maine while they are seeking asylum to stay in this country. Their cases have to be adjudicated, but right now they cannot work. They are prohibited from working up to a year after they filed their application for asylum. And as you point out, in many cases, they have skills, they speak English, they want to work. They want to work to support themselves and their families. And instead, they're forced to be dependent on public assistance. That puts a great deal of pressure on the cities and towns like Portland that are having to support them. And it also puts a lot of pressure on nonprofit organizations that are supporting them, like Catholic Charities of Maine. And it makes no sense. They're willing to work, they're able to work, they have the skills that we need. And I'll tell you, I cannot talk to an employer in this state who is not searching for workers. We have a real gap in the number of jobs that are available and the number of people who can fill them right now. I hope this will go away as COVID restrictions are eased, but I think that we should allow these individuals to work 30 days after they have filed their applications for asylum. That would allow for an initial screening. And let me point out that these individuals have had health screenings. They have been vetted to make sure they're not on terrorist watch lists, for example. And we could really use their help, and they really want to be self-sufficient and work. So to me, this bill is a win-win all the way around. I introduced it with Kirsten Sinema. We introduced it in the last Congress as well, but unfortunately it did not pass then. And Angus King has co-sponsored it. So this is something I really hope that we can get done, particularly in this environment where we're seeing this influx. It doesn't mean that that this influx shouldn't be dealt with, because we have a real problem at our border with a lack of security there. But these are individuals there. I think right now in Maine, there are something like 760 new asylum seekers that have come in the last few months. Mm-hmm. And we should, after they've gone through the vetting, the health screenings, and made their applications, allow them to work, support their families, not be dependent on public assistance, and help employers who are desperate for more workers.
And to that, we could not agree with you more. And we thank you so much for introducing that. And anything that we can do to help, we're certainly there. I know I am pushing my luck, but I want to close with this. I'm sure you know this, but March is actually Women's History Month. And actually on March the 8th, which is the day that this will be played to those who will be viewing this program, it is also the International Women's Day. And frankly, I cannot think of anyone more appropriate that I would want to single out that has stood tall, strong in representing the state and achieving success on our behalf, not just here in the state, but on the national level. We thank you for that. I also want to mention that in that same vein, that in 2000, I think it was, or 2001, you co-authored a book that said 9 and counting. And boy, has that been counting. It's up to, I think you said 24 plus, that's not counting the Vice President Harris. That's great work.
Thank you so much, Dana. That's really incredibly kind of you. Maine has a great record of recognizing women leaders, and I'm really have been inspired by those who have come before me, Margaret J. Smith in particular. And also it's wonderful to recognize younger leaders, and as well as people like Jessica Meir, the astronaut who was born and grew up in my hometown of Caribou, and is about to be inducted in the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. And as we celebrate international women's leadership, I hope we will remember the women and girls in Afghanistan. I am going to be going with Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire to the UN later this month to meet with the new advocate for women and girls in Afghanistan, because I really fear for them. And it's important that we stand up for them as well.
Well, Senator, it seems inadequate to say this, but I say it sincerely. Thank you so much. And while you mentioned how others had inspired you, believe me, you will be inspiring those to come as well. So thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. And we look forward to the next time we can have you on as a regular.
Thank you, Dana.
Our pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now let's turn our attention to back home here in Maine and the issues that we face as 130th comes to a close, the second session, I should say. And here to discuss what's in play, or at least some of those in play, because obviously in 50 minutes, we're not going to have the opportunity to speak to all of them, but I have 3 people very close to me that I think very highly of: Peter Gore, Linda Caprera, and Ben Lucas. All 3 of those are the advocacy team. Peter leads them as vice president and helps me as executive VP. But together, they are going to be sharing with all of you some of the things we need to keep our eye on, and perhaps even reach out to our legislator. Let me put it in context in this way. Here we are, the 8th of March, and we have approximately 6 weeks to go before the scheduled adjournment takes place on April 22nd. And we're assuming that it will take place on that day. But we've had 5 times that the legislature has been brought back to the Capitol to act on business before them in January and February. We have 6 days that leadership has established in March. Tomorrow is the first of those 6 days, and every Tuesday and Thursday thereafter until the end of the month, they'll be here in the Capitol. There's a lot of bills to take care of. Most bills are supposed to be out of committee by the 11th. I did say most purposely because there are some that's going to be very difficult to do. But there's a lot to be done, and we are about to tell you about some of those. One of the major issues that you're going to see this session as it plays out will be those extra dollars that we've received in our state as a result of estimates on revenue exceeding what was earlier established. That totals about $1.2 billion in 2 separate announcements. And I think that you are finding already that the intent by the governor when she put forward her proposal was to return half of that to the people, the taxpayers of Maine. That's roughly 800,000 people to the amount of roughly $750 to each eligible individual or family member. You're going to see that be discussed a lot between now and the end. But that's not all. So Peter, I'm going to hand it to you and you can pass it off to both Linda and Ben to talk about some of the issues that you see that we need to be concerned about.
Thing, Dana, and thank you. Well, as you indicated, the legislature has a lot of work to do before they adjourn theoretically on April the 20th. I think it's very unlikely, well, it's impossible that they'll finish their work by this Friday. And the reality is committees will probably be through the end of this month, not all, but some. But in the Labor Committee last week, they finished their work on two bills, which if folks have tuned in to us, and I know they have, they've heard us talk a lot about LD 225 and LD 607. 225 is the bill that requires employers to cash out any unused vacation time. There was a negotiated settlement with language on that bill. It will be prospective, effective January for any accrued vacation time effective 1/1/23. It only applies to employers with 10 or more employees. And it really doesn't change a lot that's currently not being done. It does require you to cash out unused vacation time, but it doesn't prohibit employer from capping that amount of time, from instituting a use it or lose it policy, from moving to PTO in which you'd be exempted from this. It doesn't rope in earned paid leave. So the overall, I think, outcome is an okay one for the business community. Even better with 607, that's the bill that would increase Maine's salary threshold, that dividing line between hourly and salaried employees, to almost $57,000 by 2025. The sponsor of the bill, Representative Rachel Talbot Ross, indicated to us and then produced an amendment in the committee that instead of moving in that direction, changed her bill to a resolve, which would ask the Department of Labor to engage in education and outreach efforts with the business community over what the salary threshold is, who's responsible, who's an hourly employee, how they qualify for overtime, who's not in the eye of the employer, and what that means as a salaried employee. It's a good outcome. That kind of education there's always a place for it. So that was a good win for the business community overall. The only other bill I'd touch on is a bill that was heard yesterday. They had an almost 8-hour public hearing on LD 2003. This was the bill from Speaker Ryan Fecteau with the results in the form of legislation from the Affordable Housing Commission that talks about how to proceed with making housing more affordable for low and middle income families in Maine. There are a variety of different recommendations. It was a back and forth public hearing all day. The chamber did testify in support of the concepts behind the bill, indicating that this is a good starting point and this was a good way for the legislature to act on what is a very important issue when it comes to workforce development and workforce attraction to the state of Maine, so we can complete the goals of the 10-year economic development plan, strategic plan that we worked on with Governor Mills. So those are my issues. Linda, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, in tax, got a couple bills I want to talk about. One is LD 1337. This is the camp tax bill. This basically would authorize municipalities to, through an ordinance, they can enact through an ordinance, an impact fee or local option tax, property tax on second homes in Maine. This is just another backdoor approach to getting a local option tax through. So if it's your second home in Maine, you could potentially get taxed yet another property tax on it. This is a really bad, basically the municipalities have to use that money for affordable housing at the local level. But really the state should be dealing with this. They shouldn't be putting this on the backs of taxpayers. So that bill was reported out of committee this week. It may appear on the calendar tomorrow. We don't know. Another bill that you want to think about is LD 1129. This would basically prohibit assessors from considering things like easements, deed restrictions when valuing property, both at the residential and the commercial use. So it's really, it really tramples in basically a taxpayer's ability to challenge assessments if they feel that those considerations ought to be used in valuing properties. So those two bills we're watching, bill was reported out as well. It could appear on the calendar tomorrow when they come in. We're gonna have to wait and see. Ben?
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and it's great to be back on the program. In the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, they've probably been one of the committees that it's been they're on target to be close to concluding their work by this upcoming Friday. It's been a very, very busy couple of months in the Environment Committee. There are two bills that I wanted to touch base on that will have impacts on businesses in all of Maine. The first one is LD 639. This is a carryover from the first session. This bill would increase the rates of recycling of construction and demolition debris into places other than landfills. The legislation as drafted on LD 1639 imposes rates that are not reachable. This would risk a business in Lewiston having to close. It would roughly impact 75 jobs in the Lewiston area. $275,000 in tax revenues lost to the city of Lewiston, and over $400,000 to Maine's municipal solid waste fund. I think the most troubling part about this bill is it goes back on an agreement that was reached 2 years ago. There was an agreement from the environmental community and the industry to increase recycling rates to locations other than landfills, which would be much more reachable goals, and have the Department of Environmental Protection review it in 2024. Now, 2 years later, the company has invested over $2 million into their business to reach these goals, and that agreement is now being threatened and having the rug pulled out from underneath them. Anytime you have the legislature that's going back on an agreement that was reached several years ago, I think that's of grave concern to the business community, and the chamber has been making our objections known to that very publicly. The other one is also dealing with solid waste is LD 259. This had a public hearing yesterday. This will increase the disposal fee at a landfill of municipal solid waste and municipal solid ash from $1 per ton to $5 per ton. And it'll also increase the fees imposed on disposal at a landfill of construction and demolition debris from $2 per ton to $10 per ton. So we have a bill that would increase costs both on businesses and in Maine and on individuals in Maine. So we obviously have great concerns anytime we're talking about increased costs. The chamber did submit testimony in opposition to LD 259. And then, switching gears to the Energy, Utilities, and Technologies Committee, there is one bill that has a work session this upcoming Thursday that I wanted to highlight, LD 1894. This bill aims to allow municipal water utilities and municipal utility districts to own and operate broadband networks. We have many concerns about this bill. The chamber has long advocated to see public-private partnerships to expand broadband services to more businesses and individuals in Maine, and we feel this bill would discourage that. We have long advocated for investment into broadband in the state of Maine. We've now had over $250 million that have been invested into the state from the federal government to expand broadband. And as drafted, LD 1894, could put at risk some of the federal dollars that are being invested to the state. So, we'll see what happens on Thursday and certainly report back. And the last thing I'll touch on is, the Energy Committee still has a lot of work to do. As of this morning, they still had 20 bills that were waiting for work session or sitting on the table that they still need to work through. So as Peter mentioned, that it's impossible for them to have their work done by the end of this week. They'll probably have, I think another solid month's worth of work before we even see some language reviews and report out. So in the Energy Committee, it'll be a mad dash to the finish line, and there's a lot of issues that are very, very important to the state and to the business community that we are still waiting for movement on. So I'll kick it back over to you, Dana.
Thanks to all three of you. As I said at the outset, these are but a few bills that will be dealt with in the next 6 weeks, and they represent what we feel need to be brought to your attention, but there are many more as well. If any of you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I would also ask this: if any of these bills are of concern to you, please reach out to your legislator who knows you and you know him or her, and they will listen. I can guarantee you that, and take advantage of that influence. It really, truly matters. Again, I thank our team, and you can see why I am so proud of them and why the Chamber appreciates so much their service to our business community, but also to our economy. Now let's move to the time we have left when we take a look at actually the takeaway for this week. Today's program really took a look at some of the issues challenging our nation as well as our state. Senator Collins spoke of the travesty of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, issue that probably overshadows all others. It's a travesty that appears to be Putin's plan to rewrite history by reestablishing the Soviet Union, and doing so at all costs, disregarding the lives and the livelihood of Ukraine people, not to mention the economic risk to Russia itself. However, in the darkness of the consequences of his selfish and barbaric efforts, I would describe, efforts that seem impossible to understand and to rationalize, there is a light in all of this, one that shines through the darkness. And the first would be the unity of NATO countries, how they've stood strong and steadfast in opposition to this one-person battle. It is strength at a time that is most needed in the world. That is positive. Also to be noted is the leadership of President Zelensky. Not only his courage, his commitment, but also his leadership on behalf of his country as well as the people of that country. Yes, it's an inspiring story of a leader that's doing everything that he can, and it's one that we deeply appreciate, having seen it play out in front of our eyes. Senator Collins also spoke of the nominee to the Supreme Court that she is interviewing today. Ketanji Brown Jackson is that nominee, the first Black woman to be, if she is confirmed, to take a seat on the Supreme Court. She also spoke to an issue that's very close and important to us, one that we've struggled with for some time. It's a bill that she introduced with co-sponsorship from our other senator, Senator King. It intentionally recognizes the skill, the talent, and the opportunities that asylum seekers bring to our state. Actually, what the bill does, it recognizes today the time it takes to obtain a permit to work. And that time is extraordinary, many times exceeding a year's length of time. In the meantime, we're without that talent, that skill. And what this bill does is to recognize all of that. And the asylum seeker will be eligible to work starting 30 days after filing an asylum application. Back home here in Maine, you were just witness to our advocacy team that recognized that there is much work to be done in the next 6 weeks in this legislature. We start tomorrow, which will be the first of 6 days that the full legislature will be back to deal with the bills at hand. And as for April, we're not quite sure yet. Legislative leadership has not established whether that'll be 5 days or every day of the week. That will be determined later on. You can tell that in those 6 weeks, decisions will be made. We hope they'll represent progress, but some could well be problems. This much I can tell you, that we're going to know those answers within those 6 weeks. And in the meantime, we're going to be there to make the very best of the situation. We're going to be there to represent you. And we'll work with anybody and everybody who shares the goal of improving our economy and helping the lives of Maine people. That is something that should unite all of us in the state and all parts of our state. But it's difficult to put into context our issues, our needs in comparison to the people of Ukraine, whose strength is to save their lives, whose struggle is to try to be sure that they continue to be a country and not a part of Russia. It's sad to recognize what is happening there. We'll do everything we can as a nation, I'm sure, but we don't live in that situation. So all we can say is be strong, and God bless all of you for what you are having to go through, and we hope you success on the other end. On a different note, but a positive note, I want to acknowledge what we heard earlier in the interview with Senator Collins. And that is, today is the International Women's Day. It's a time for all of us to pause, to be proud, to take stock of the women in our state who occupy key and important positions of leadership. It is incredible when you look around you, you take the time to recognize those who are in key positions and the influence that they provide, the experience they give us in terms of having our state be as successful as it is and will be going forward. Yeah, this is a day that we should pause and be proud, but most of all, to say thank you. And I do. Thank you. That is the main take for this week. It's been our pleasure to be able to provide you the information that we hope matters to you. We'll see you back here next week. But as we always say when we close out this program, is be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. Until we see you again next Tuesday, stay safe and stay strong. Look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.